Chapter 7, Beyond Childhood Trauma, Part 2. I jotted down everything after my P. Sherman 42 Wallaby Way, Sydney epiphany. All of my pain, all of my questions. I wrote them down in detail without filter. It took me weeks to go to my father and confront him on what he did to me as a young child. The thing that really pushed me to tell him then rather than later was the fact that I knew that nobody knows how long they have on this earth. I don't know how long my father will be on this earth. I don't know how long I will be on this earth. I rathered confronting my father while he was still alive and not look down at him in a casket or tell him to a picture of him, which was my alternative option. If you don't have that person living, I say it's never too late to get what you have to say off of your chest. I would highly recommend looking at their picture and speaking to it as if they were alive. Talking to someone close to you and, of course, therapy. Once I got up the courage, I prayed. And then I went to my father's room and I told him I needed to talk and that I had questions, but I didn't want to see his reaction when I said these things because I knew that my dad was so sorry for what he did and hated that he had caused me so much turmoil. But I had to get it out. If I saw his face, it would make me want to stop because I felt that I was being cruel to him by bringing up old feelings again. So I sat down with my back turned to him and I read word for word what I had journaled. I read one of the questions that asked him, what was going on through your mind when you did this? He told me. He told me so much that I started grimacing because it wasn't the answer that I wanted to hear. But I was grateful that he was being so honest with me. Because my father was so transparent, my gift to him is to not reveal what it was that he told me was going on in his mind. I believe vulnerability is a superpower, and my father used that because he knew that I needed it. And for that, I am forever grateful. For the rest of the conversation, I had to turn my daughter ears off and truly listen with curiosity in order to not get triggered. Through his honesty and transparency, he then disclosed to me that there had been a history of incestual sexual perversion on his side of the family. And at that very moment, I found myself no longer angry at my father, and instead directed my rage at the true enemy, Lucifer. And at that moment, the beyond the man dream came back to me. I was so mad at my dad that I didn't see the one behind the curtain. And from that day on, my perspective changed. That night, I decided to get my laptop and my Bible and sit it at the table where I would be writing a book. This book. I knew that I would be passing by that table every day. That's why I put it there. I needed a visual reminder of what God had called me to do. One night, I felt the burden from the Holy Spirit to write. I felt the burden of the Holy Spirit to write so much that I was going to sit down and start writing. But I felt an ungodly presence. I felt it at the place around where my laptop and Bible were. And for a brief moment, I saw the presence. not in the natural, but in the spirit. It was about as tall as my standing lamp and as wide as a sofa cushion. It didn't move. It felt like this demonic presence and I were having an intense stare down. It was almost as if this presence was saying, if you do this, I am coming after you and everyone you love. And this made me shy away. I just went back to bed. I never stirred the pot in my entire life. So the possibility of there being a problem from something that I did made me nervous. Why I didn't rebuke that spirit right then and there? It's probably because I didn't want to write this book. My flesh didn't want to, but my spirit felt it so hard. And that demonic presence just confirmed in me, in my flesh, the thing that I did not want to do. So it was a cop-out, and I took the cop-out. When I went back to bed, I couldn't sleep. It seemed as if that night stretched on forever. The compulsion to write this book, it was still relentless on my spirit. That night passed, and many more nights. Every night, I felt that heaviness on my spirit to start writing. I tossed and turned, seeking relaxation, but could never find it. So I did what most people do when they find themselves awake in the early hours of the morning, alone with time on their hands. I pulled out my phone and watched porn. That had been my routine ever since I was young. I remember feeling the way that I felt whenever my father would assault me. And I went to porn so that I could further explore what my father had opened up. Porn became my silent soother, my guaranteed lullaby. I just wanted relief. I just wanted to fall asleep. So that's what I did. Every night when I felt that wrestle. Then one night, I navigated to Google and prepared to engage in my usual ritual when suddenly I heard God's voice. Once I pulled the video up that I wanted, He said, ever so clearly in my spirit, "Who is that?" This moment rocked me to my core. Sitting up in bed, I burst into tears. But it wasn't the guilt of being caught that provoked me to my sobs. Rather, it was the realization that God had answered a prayer that I had prayed when I committed myself to writing this book. I had asked Him to reveal myself to myself, and in that moment, He did precisely that. What I saw on my screen, pulled up on Pornhub, became the catalyst for why I decided that that night I was going to begin to write the book. You see, on my screen were two individuals. They were related. More than that, they were mother and son. This was significant because in my family, I was aware of various combinations of family members engaging in sexual acts with one another. The only family members that I had not heard of being involved in such actions were a mother and a son. Why is this significant to me? I have longed for a son more than anything else in life. And in that moment, I realized that the enemy was setting me up, just like he had my father, to continue the pattern of incestual sexual perversion and completed. Immediately, I threw my phone against the wall and I wept and I repented and I thanked God for bringing this to my attention. Without missing a beat, I moved to my laptop, sat down, opened my laptop, and typed the words, "Beyond the Man," the title of this book. I stared at the screen, and it caused tears to well up in my eyes again. I leaned back in the chair, sobbing in my hands. It felt as if God and all of heaven were cheering, as though I had finally brought something from heaven to earth after years of burden. At last, this generational curse was going to be confronted and obliterated. A thought echoed in my mind. The spirit of sexual perversion might have run through my family line, but it stops with me. My children will be free of this. And after this profound realization, I found myself embroiled in intense spiritual warfare. That night, the enemy knew he was in trouble.